Scranton Abington's Planning Association meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. If you would join me with a pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to keep this meeting this evening informal and as productive as possible. And in doing so, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lee Jamison. I'm the chairman of the Scranton Abington's Planning Association Committee. And I would just like to touch briefly on a few significant points here tonight. The purpose of this meeting is the SAPA group, which is the acronym for Scranton Abington Planning Association, has developed a draft comprehensive plan for all 11 of our communities. This plan provides a general framework for all future land use, including transportation, housing, environmental protection, and economic development, as well as other issues. The draft plan is now ready for public review. At this meeting, we will invite the members of the public and the residents, as well as business owners, to have any feedback on the draft plan. We would like to get as much input from the public as possible, so we would like to ask you all to feel free to participate in this plan, in this meeting. There's been an awful lot of very dedicated people who have brought this project to this point this evening, and I would just, by way of recognizing them, I would like to ask all SAPA committee members to please stand and identify themselves just by name and the community they represent, just so the people in the audience have an idea of how well diverse this group has been and how much support we've had. So if the SAPA committee members would please stand and just begin to state their name and their communities. Okay, as I said, I'm Lee Jamison from Newton Township. At this point, I would like to introduce someone who has provided tireless assistance and invaluable assistance from the very beginning of this project. It would be Cindy Campbell from the Department of Community and Economic Development. Cindy?
Thank you, Lee, and welcome everyone to this meeting. Again, I would like to congratulate the Scranton, Abington, and Dunmore Planning Association. For many of you who may not be familiar, Dunmore came in a little bit later once the acronym was already developed, but they are certainly a valuable partner in the whole process. The SAPA group is a very passionate, committed group of people, the committee members are, who have dedicated an awful lot of time to this project. More time than I think any of them bargained for, actually. The process itself is quite detailed when you do it for a single municipality or two, but when you put in 11, there's so much diversity and so much hard work, and the group is definitely to be commended for sticking together and pulling together and doing all the hard work they've done, and particularly to Denise Prowell, who's the secretary and coordinator. Many groups are not lucky enough to have someone like Denise, and she really has kind of been the thread of it all. So, you know, so thank you, Denise. And as Lee mentioned, I'm with the Department of Community and Economic Development. I'm a community planner with the Center for Local Government Services in Scranton. And I cover 13 counties in northeastern Pennsylvania and have many, many projects that are funded through the Land Use Planning and Technical Assistance Program, which this project was funded, to develop a comprehensive land use plan, which basically is a plan that will look out to the future of what the municipality looks like now, the municipalities look like now, and where they want to go, what they want their future to look like, and how do you get there. And the consultant team will, of course, go into much more detail through the night on that. But the process is multifaceted. This is the beginning, and although there was immense amounts of hours put into this and a lot of work, it is the first step to the next process being the implementation of this plan through updating of ordinances and other plans. And so we'll give them a little breather time, and providing the legislature puts money back in the program, we'll start moving on the implementation of this project, hopefully in the next year or so. But again, this is the beginning of the beginning, or the end of the beginning, I guess you can look at it that way, because it is finally coming to fruition. This plan is finally coming together, and I'd like to congratulate the consultants on a job well done as well. And with that, I would like to introduce Joe Bukovetsky and John Mullen from McCormick Taylor, who will take you through this evening with a PowerPoint presentation explaining what this is all about. And again, thank you to the SAPA committee for a job well done.
Thank you, Cindy. I am Joe Bukovetsky from McCormick Taylor, and John Mullen is here with me as well from McCormick Taylor. McCormick Taylor has been assisting the SAPA committee through these many months in going through a process of preparing a multi-municipal comprehensive plan, and it's reached the point where there now is a document that is available for public review, a document that is available for the individual municipalities to proceed with adoption. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but there are 11 municipalities that have cooperated in putting together this draft plan. There's going to need to be adoption processes that are followed by the elected officials of each of those municipalities. This is a vision of the future, as Cindy has alluded to. It is the first step, as she also talked about. This is the third meeting. I have a question. How many people did not attend either of the two previous public meetings? Quite a few, okay. Well, the PowerPoint is probably then well suited for this group because it highlights the process. The content of the plan itself is somewhat technical. You should look at it because it's possibly your plan, depending on what happens in terms of that adoption, but it's a little difficult to present all of the details. Go to the website, the URL is up there on the screen, and you can see the content of this draft comprehensive plan. I am going to go through a little bit about the process that was followed by the committee in preparing this plan, and you'll see that it is a pretty elaborate process. Here's the work program schedule, as we call it. It's over, a number of months and a number of phases, and we'll just sort of look at what these phases are. But it follows a very orderly process to finally get to that wide bar that's down at the end. There we go. That's where we are now. We're right here, the third public information meeting and the review period that's coming up. So it's taken a while to get here. In the first phase, it's really a matter of answering the question of where are we now? What we try and do is document existing conditions and analyze them. There is an update of the planning database. You really do a careful survey of existing land use. Now remember, land use is how the land is used. It's not zoning, but on the ground, how is the land actually used today? You do a pretty careful survey of natural resources as well, because they're very important components. That's your floodplains and your wetlands and your steep slopes on your agricultural lands and so forth. You look carefully at the circulation system, how the transportation system works. You look at the community facilities. You look at a lot of things very carefully. And then we have as well the document of change. What's been happening lately? So we document carefully land use changes, subdivisions and land developments that have taken place, public improvements, might be new roads, a new park. All of that's documented very carefully. And then demographic and housing analysis. Tricky business. You look at the population of an area, the age groups, you look at the kind of housing that exists, and then you try and do some forecasts about what's going to occur over the next 20 years, because that's what we're looking at. This plan is a vision for the year 2030, which, technically speaking, is 21 years from now, and of course we've been working on it for a couple of years, so we were looking at 22, 23 years. And you got to try and establish some basic numbers about how many people you think are going to live and work here, which is pretty difficult to do. Then what we do is assess the current development trends. Again, you've documented it, but what does it mean? And then we talk about planning issues and goals. Where do you want to go? What are the communities interested in terms of a direction? What do they want to see changed? What do they want to keep the same? And then we identify some alternative development themes where we want to explore with the committee and with those that had attended the first couple of meetings different ways that these 11 communities could evolve into the future. Because you don't instantly get the answer. You have to test some things, try some different things out. Then we get into phase B, which is the visioning phase. To me, it's the most interesting and exciting part. We look at different themes for the future, and we try out some different concepts, and we basically test them. They're tested in some ways in a kind of quantitative way, but in other ways, it's just bouncing ideas around, steering committee members talking to one another, members of the public that attend the meetings talking about what they'd like to see happen, what ideas make sense, what ideas don't make sense. And then we had to try and put it all together into a form that seems to be the direction that everybody feels most comfortable with for the future. And then we prepare the draft plan document. And of course, that's the document that's now having its kind of coming out today. It's now available, but it's prepared as a preliminary draft and it's revised over time. There are requirements that have to go into a comprehensive plan based on the state law. So there's a lot of work that is involved with that, but you end up with a plan for the future land use, how the area will look 20 years in the future, what the uses of land will be, where everything will go, where will the housing be, where will the shopping be, where will the offices be, where will the industrial areas be, where will the parks be, where will the agricultural areas be. And then you look at various other things in support of the future land use. How are we going to get around? What's the circulation system going to be like? What are our community facilities going to be like? Our utilities? What about our park system? How about protecting the environment and so forth? And then gradually this thing gets revised into a final draft form, which is what you have now. And finally, this is the big review bar. This is what we're just starting now, the big review period for the final draft plan. And then that final draft will be considered by the elected officials of each of the 11 municipalities, and hopefully each one of them will make that move and adopt it. And then the final plan, with any amendments that are required on the basis of the review, those amendments would be made, and then you have a final document, which then becomes the policy document of all 11 municipalities. And as you're going to hear over and over again, it's not really the finish of anything. Of course, it's the finish of the plan, but it's the start of the implementation. So along the bottom of this diagram are a series of circles and stars and squares, and they represent the regular meetings with the steering committee. This is now the third public information meeting. We started out where there's some stars on the left, lower left, with a series of focus groups where we got to talk to residents and business people in the community about what was important to them. And ultimately, we're going to end up at a public hearing, which is a quasi-judicial process, meaning that the views of those that were in attendance or those that wish to send in opinions will be read into the record, and that will be something that the elected officials will take into account as when they deliberate as to whether to adopt the plan. So here are some of the involvement we've had. There's the SAPA committee that is really the group that's put this together. We had a township tour early on, the focus groups I mentioned. We had meetings with individual municipalities. We've had public meetings, and of course we have our website. The centerpiece of the first part of the activities to prepare a comprehensive plan is really looking closely at the existing land use. And what we see here is a very diverse set of communities. You can see a kind of division which is kind of below the notch and above the notch. But below the notch we've got Scranton and Dunmore, older places, very highly developed. In terms of their land uses, they've got real diversity. They've got low-density residential, they've got medium-density residential, they've got high-density residential. Those are the various yellows and beiges in there. They've got a lot of commercial, that's red. They've got a lot of institutional, those are various blues. They've got industrial and so forth. As you move up to the Abingtons, you get a different pattern. There are generous areas of residential, of course, which are shown in yellow, but you also have large areas of agriculture and open space. You have parkland, and you have some, of course, additional commercial areas and industrial areas and institutional areas. We're not going to go through all the mapping, but you can look at it out in the hallway there. You can also look at it online, but all of these other things have been identified, described, and mapped. And these are all existing conditions, what's happened recently. Pending and proposed development is what's coming down the pike, so to speak, development that we're aware of that is coming along and likely to be developed soon. So all of these things were looked at in Phase A. Special emphasis in this plan preparation was in stormwater management, since it is an area of real concern, and there was a special effort provided. We were assisted by Borton Lawson, a local engineering firm, in preparing the documentation and the recommendations excuse me, for stormwater management. And there is a map out there that documents the problem areas. They have reviewed the local ordinances, and they have developed a model ordinance, which is also part of the draft comprehensive plan. So some of the identifying opportunities from the first stage I was mentioning about looking at population trends and doing some forecasts. We're not going to look at them closely, but you can look online and see everything up close. We got our 11 municipalities, shows how their population has changed over about 30 years. Got the Sapa area down toward the bottom. It's more than half of the population of Lackawanna County. And at 2000, you had about 114,000 people living in the Sapa area. And we look at how the communities are growing or shrinking. We try and do these forecasts out to 2030. Again, this crystal ball gazing is pretty difficult business, but we arrive at some kind of number, somewhere 115, 120,000, something like that, for the figure that we expect to live in the total 11 municipality area in the year 2030. And we turn those numbers, which are on the top row here, low 114,000 people, medium 117,000, high 120,000. And we sort of calculate about how many housing units you're going to need to house that population. And you see in the bottom, for the medium one, it means that you're going to need about 53 new housing units per year for a 30-year period from 2000 to 2030. Again, this gives us some kind of ballpark figures about what kind of growth we can expect and how many people we have to accommodate and how many housing units. We do a similar thing for non-residential development, that is mostly your retail and office. It's also a very tricky business, very much crystal ball gazing, but we try and come up with some numbers that, again, we're going to use in the exploration of alternatives. And it's a rough estimate about how much land might be needed for new development. So here, again, we've identified the opportunities, looked at the existing conditions and analyzed them. And we put together something called the trend scenario. This is the future in 2030 if there's no change in policy, no change in direction. And those chips, which are mostly yellow, there's a few of them that are red, they represent new residential development. And it's somewhat of an educated speculation as to where they would go. But if there's no change in policy, it looks like there's going to be a lot of development occurring in the Abingtons, relatively little in Scranton. That's basically saying if trends continue, that's likely what you're going to get. It's going to be continued population moving out of Scranton, disinvestment, Scranton and Dunmore, for the most part, and a lot of development occurring in areas that are basically greenfields now, in townships like Newton and West Abington, North Abington, Glenburn. It's showing kind of a lot of sprawl, basically. That's what the trend is showing. So one of the things you do is kind of evaluate this. What do you think of this? Is this the way you want to go? Is there a better way to go? And we explore these alternatives in the visioning phase. We look at a series of different alternatives. We're just going to quickly look at them. But we use the same chip idea. We take the same amount of development in each alternative, and we put them in different places representing different ideas. In this case, urban centers, most of the development, instead of sprawling up in the Abingtons, would be concentrated in where there are existing centers. Some of them, of course, Scranton and Dunmore, and some of them up South Abington, Clark Summit, Clark's Green, like those kinds of areas. Some in Dalton, too, you can see. That's just an idea. Same amount of development in each of these. It's a question of where does it go and what kind of development do you want to have? What kind of communities do you want to have? Alternative 2, same amount of development. This time they tend to be around the interchanges along 81. Again, it's just an idea worth exploring. What do you think about that? What kind of communities would we have? What kind of places would they be? How would they work? Looked at trying to do a lot of the development along 611, suburban and urban. You can see it's kind of lined up along 611 up in the Abingtons. Rural centers, that was a very different idea. One, by the way, that was not popular with members of the committee, but it was saying, how about creating some new centers? These would be tightly organized. They wouldn't really be allowed to sprawl, but they would exist into some of these areas like Newton and West Abington, North Abington and Glenburn don't have a lot of population now, and you try and get a good mix of residential, retail, and office in these places. It wasn't a very popular idea, as it turns out. Scranton TOD. TOD is transit-oriented development, which is an idea that's receiving a lot of attention nationally. It has to do with things like the high price of fuel. It has to do with the fact that in the marketplace, it's proven pretty popular. But if you mix uses around where there's a station, you can get a lot of activity. You can also get good access, not just by car, but also by transit, and then you can also walk around in these places. So this put most of the development right around a transit station in the middle of Scranton. And then we kind of compare all of these alternatives. We talk about what they might mean in terms of the kind of development, the pattern, what the effect on natural resources would be, on utilities and transportation. We just kind of compare them and talk about which ones seem to have merit and which ones don't. Then we go back and we try out some new alternatives. We try combining some different ideas. That's what this one did. We're sort of, again, exploring, but we're in a next phase, so we're getting a little bit more sophisticated. We're putting some ideas together here. And here's another one. Again, we're putting together a series of ideas. Are they good combinations? Is this a good balance? Development below the notch and development above the notch, and so forth. Does it make sense in terms of how people will live in 2030? And we're still always comparing this to the trend scenario, which I showed you before. So how are each of those alternatives versus the trend scenario? What are the implications? Does it make a better future to do one of these other scenarios? In what way is it better? And we've been working with these chips for a while, but at a certain point, we have to decide that's enough work with the chips. Now we need to do a plan for the future, which represents where the different uses will go in a very kind of balanced way, in a similar way to the existing land use that you have today. So here's the existing land use, which we commented on before, and we're going to do a plan for the future land use, or the land use plan that is going to be the equivalent for the year 2030. So, flying a plane over the area now, you've got your special color-coded glasses, you look down, this is what you see. This is how these 11 municipalities are today. Fly a plane around in 2030, same kind of glasses on. This is what we have now. We have a draft land use plan. This is what the committee has been working on all this time. And that's the centerpiece of the comprehensive plan document. And there's a lot of narrative and there's a lot of maps and things, but this is really the key thing. This is the direction, this is the vision that this committee has come up with to this point. And you can see in the legend some of the different features of it. We're just going to go around the area looking at where some of those features are right now. But of course that map is out in the hallway, and it is in the report, and it is up on the website, and it is the centerpiece of the whole plan. This is the vision of the future. We have a category called City Center, which is, of course, in the middle of Scranton. It's that bright pink area in the middle. There we go, right in here. And obviously, that's the most intense kind of use, biggest mix of use, different kinds of uses occurring together. We have borough centers, and we have a number of them. We have Clark Summit. We have a little bit, here we go. We have a little bit in Clark's Green. We have one up there in Dalton, too. That's a borough center. And we have a borough center in Dunmore, Blakely Street area, Blakely and Drinker. We have some village centers, and all these areas are described in the plan. We're not going to be able to get into it in any detail in this presentation, but what is a village center like? A village center, I think you can assume, just intuitively, is going to be obviously less dense, less concentrated than certainly a city center and probably a borough center as well. But it's clearly a place, too, where some combining of different things. I mean, this is, Waverly is shown here in Abington. So there's a place which is mostly residential, but it's got a few other things, community facilities, and a little bit of retail going on there. So a village center is, again, you probably sort of intuitively understand it, but if you want to read about it in detail, go to the website and read the description of village centers. So there's one at Waverly in Abington. There's another one which we're kind of calling the Red Barn Village Center, which is in Newton Township. Then we have a category called urban neighborhood, which is this very broad area that's kind of a beige color. It's kind of yellow up there, isn't it? It's beige on my screen. But that's the broad extent of Scranton and Dunmore that are already developed residential areas, and they're basically going to stay that way. They're going to remain through the planning period urban residential areas, a mix of different kinds of residential uses. One of the categories that is emphasized in this land use plan is a mixed use category, which is, as you might infer, trying to combine closely knit residential, retail, and office areas. These are areas that would be walkable, which is very promising for a future, as we are probably going to have over the next 20 years of very high fuel prices. You're going to need opportunities where you can reach things that you need by foot, by bicycle, by transit, or if it's a car trip, a pretty short car trip, rather than paying who knows what it's going to be per gallon. So we have the Scranton area. We have what we call the city center extended area. Whoops. Probably use this thing. That area up in there is the major mixed-use area for Scranton. We have mixed-use corridors. Sorry, we have a couple of things here we want to show. Mixed use, which in Scranton is the city center extended area up in here. Then we also have another very important idea in the land use plan, which are mixed-use corridors. And again, it's a similar idea, mixing residential, retail, and office together in closely knit areas that are potentially usable for transit by on foot and by bicycle. And these corridors are very important as well in this plan. The ones identified in Scranton include Pittston Avenue and Main Avenue in a couple of different places, and Mulberry Street. The mixed-use corridors are also an important content for this land use plan outside of the areas below the notch, and that is going up 611. And we see areas of mixed-use corridors along 611 in South Abington and up here in Glenburn as well. Then we have another category, which is employment centers. That's the very bright red that you see here. And some of these areas are very familiar to you in the Scranton and Dunmore area, alongside 81, Kaiser Avenue, down by the river just south of the city center, and at Davis Street exit of 81. So these areas are where there's a lot of business activity, including industrial and business park, and those areas would be reinforced over the next 20 years. Now, if you go up the hill, you see extensive areas of bright yellow on the land use plan, and that's a recognition of the residential component that is really very strong in the Abingtons. That's the bright yellow. It represents, by and large, the existing residential areas, the neighborhoods that are there. They're not anticipated to change. They're going to remain largely as they are. There might be a little what we call infill So if there's a vacant property, somebody might build on it, but it's going to remain pretty stable. We have another category of residential, which is the sort of cream color that's shown here, and it's a lower intensity. It's stepping away from the more developed residential and suburban areas that we were looking at a second ago, and this area that would be much lower intensity of use than the bright yellow. And then we have the dominance of, in terms of the total land area of the Abingtons, of this green category, which is agriculture, open space, and limited very low density residential. And the plan is basically recommending that these areas stay open. They can be used for agriculture and forestry and recreation. If there is residential, it should be very, very low density. So we're trying to sort of concentrate the development in places where it can have the most benefit for people, such as in our centers, and trying to keep the open areas open so that they can be used for agriculture, used for recreation, and just enjoyed as part of the open space of this 11 municipality area. There's another thing that's shown in the land use plan, which is this sort of hatched area, and that's a recognition that regardless of what land use category you're in, and we've just gone through them, there are natural features, which might be floodplains, steep slopes, wetlands, et cetera, which need to be taken into account no matter what your land use category is. They're just there. It's a fact of life. And those are shown on the land use plan, reminding everyone that those need to be taken into account. Here's some other areas where those are shown as well. This is where 476 is just coming up into Newton. So that's a look around the land use plan, this vision of the future for all 11 municipalities. Some of you may be familiar with the Bi-County Open Space Plan, which was prepared in 2004. The recommendations in this SAPA plan are consistent with that. Just to give you a little picture of that, these are the recommendations for open space from that 2004 Bi-County Open Space Plan. And the bottom section here shows just a little section from the land use plan. So we're trying to be consistent with what's being shown in the open space plan, and in fact advancing some of its ideas as well. So we arrived in our process at the point where the draft plan could be put together. We have this centerpiece, which is the land use plan. Now we need to put together all these other pieces of it, and they are in the plan. We're not going to be able to go through all of them. But just to remind you, the main recommendations chapter in the plan is chapter 3. It's called the Growth Management Plan. It talks about land use first, because the land use plan is its centerpiece. It talks about transportation, and that includes recommendations not only for automobile, but also for transit, and for pedestrian movement, and for trails, and for biking. A housing plan talks about where housing of different kinds should be, including high density, medium density, low density housing. Environmental protection plan, talking in some detail about how the resources can be protected through the next 20 years. A similar thing with historic preservation plan. A plan for parks, recreation, and open space, how the needs of communities can be met over the next 20 years in those areas. And community facilities and utilities plan, again, trying to look out and describe the characteristics of the community facilities and utilities that will be needed to support the population that will live here in 2030. Now that's chapter 3, and that's the main recommendations of the plan. Another chapter that's very important is chapter 4, which is implementation strategies. The recommendations for the plan have taken a lot of work to put together. But if this plan doesn't go any further than just coming up with recommendations, you have a plan that sits on the shelf and nothing happens on the ground. If you want things to happen, you need to embark on real implementation strategies. Because the area is so diverse, you need to focus those on what implementation strategies would make the most sense for rural areas, for suburban areas, and for urban areas. And we have in the plan a lot of discussion of this. We just can summarize them here Here's a variety of different kinds of rural strategies that are here, obviously protecting the natural resources that are there. The next three are kind of interesting: development rights purchase, conservation easements, transferable development rights. These are ways in which development can take place where it should, in the centers, and not in the open green areas, but at the same time, the property rights and the equity that property owners might have in open areas can be protected. So those are some interesting measures. By the way, these strategies, none of these are, in a sense, dictated by the plan. They're choices. They're ideas that municipalities should consider if they want to implement the plan. And this is a little bit like a menu. They will get to choose which ones make the most sense for their community. There's also a presentation in the plan about agricultural zoning, but it is not something that needs to be done. It's something that communities should consider. And some of these other options that are in here, including open space acquisition, again, are options for communities. In rural areas, the regional parks would be important, the greenways, and something called conservation subdivision zoning, which tries to protect the open space even as development occurs. So there's some strategies for rural communities. We have a number of suburban municipalities, and they really should look at trying to concentrate their development in the mixed-use areas, provide some density bonuses to be able to take in the development that might come from some of the more rural areas. They too, of course, need to look at protecting their natural resources. For them, the stormwater management ordinances are important. They probably have stormwater management problems now, and they want to solve those problems over the planning period. They're going to be interested in neighborhood parks to serve their communities, and they're going to be interested in some other things: conservation subdivision zoning, which I mentioned, and traditional neighborhood development. These are particular aspects of residential development that could be important. And then something called access management regulations, which are really about trying to limit the number of driveways you have along your major roads so that you keep them safe and that you keep them able to move traffic along. For our urban strategies, we're looking at mixed use and corridor zoning districts, looking at transit-oriented development, civic squares and neighborhood parks, looking at the buildings that are there, good quality older buildings, and adaptively reusing them and restoring them should be part of an urban strategy. Design guidelines, kind of leading developers and property owners who want to develop as to what the communities are looking for in terms of design, the kinds of results and the kind of qualities they would like in new buildings. They need to look at stormwater management as well, and they may need to consider development incentives to try and get developers interested in developing in urban areas. So there's a lot of work to be done, and as you're hearing, and you're going to hear more of, getting the vision set is great, but just having the vision isn't enough. You've got to move forward into implementation. There are a lot of partners that can help with implementation. The municipalities can try and do some things on their own. They can band together in different sized groups. A group of 11 might proceed to try and do something all together, but it might be smaller groups, a group of 3 over here, a group of 5 over there, that might try and work on something together. The county is there to assist, so is DCED, and several other state agencies that are listed there. And then you have other players. There are important institutions, nonprofits, foundations, and community organizations that can and should and will help in the implementation of the ideas that are in this plan. And then there are the developers and the private sector investors as well. They too are partners in putting these ideas into effect. So the next steps, we've come out here. We're at the big wide band. We're at the 3rd public information meeting. We're about to start a formal review process, a formal review period, which looks something like this. The SAPA committee needs to decide that they want to recommend the draft plan to the elected officials of all 11 municipalities and that they favorably consider the plan for adoption. So they've yet to do that, but they need to do that. They need to take an action. They need to adopt a measure which they are formally recommending that the plan be considered favorably for adoption by each of the elected officials' boards. Then a formal 45-day review period for the draft plan occurs. The plan is available for a review by Lackawanna County, and they will do a plan review. It's available for school districts, for adjacent municipalities, and any interested party. Anybody may comment on it. And then a public hearing will be held. The public hearing, as I mentioned, there will be testimony that will be taken. You can attend in person and give testimony. You can submit things in writing if you would like it to be considered. And then each municipality will take independent action to adopt. One of the things to remember is that implementation actions can start as soon as parties are ready to proceed. You're on the path towards the formality of full municipal adoption of the plan, but each municipality may take its own time. We don't know how long all 11 are going to take to adopt, but that's no reason to hold up implementation. As soon as the parties are ready, if 3 municipalities are ready to proceed to do some implementation together, they can go ahead and try and get that started. I'm going to show you in a second the timetable for implementation of the comprehensive plan, a very important part of the document. It sets forth the actions, the timing, and the primary responsible party for plan implementation. Remember, the plan will only be as effective as its implementation steps. Otherwise, you have a pretty plan, looks nice on the shelf, but doesn't do much for you. So here are some of the implementation steps. The first one, of course, is to adopt the plan. Elected officials need to do that. Communities need to prepare and adopt stormwater ordinance amendments. 1 to 2 years is the time period. Prepare and adopt a SAPA Park Recreation and Open Space Plan. That would be a kind of a detail for the overall vision. The overall vision has some recommendations for park recreation and open space plan, but you probably want to look at it in more detail and prepare a special park recreation and open space plan, 1 to 2 years. Prepare and adopt high priority zoning amendments, 1 to 3 years. There's a lot of ideas in here that have the implication of potential zoning change. The plan doesn't change the zoning, but if you want to see changes on the ground, you're going to have to change some of the zoning. And that's something that a committee or subcommittee of SAPA might look at, and then individual municipalities are going to have to take action on. Prepare and adopt high-priority mixed-use centers, village centers, and mixed-use corridor master plans. This plan is really broad brush. It has some ideas about those things, but those areas would need to be looked at in more detail, and you'd need to prepare more detailed plans. That's a very important implementation step, 2 to 4 years. Complete a historic site survey. Prepare and adopt historic resources protection ordinances. Right now, you still need more surveys to be done. There are some things that are on survey and some things that have yet to be recognized. That needs to be done. Then you can adopt ordinances that will protect the historic resources, 4 to 5 years. Prepare and adopt a transportation master plan. Again, the plan you have now in draft form is pretty broad brush. Going to want to look at some of those things much more closely. There's some recommendations for transit, for example, that need to be looked at more closely. Adopt an official map. Official map is something that the state has as part of its legislation for local municipalities. You can identify specific things in it, and it will support many of these concepts that are part of this vision, 5 to 6 years. Implement a trail system, 6 years. You've got a trail system as part of your bi-county open space plan. This reinforces it, and some implementation has also already occurred, but you need to rev that up. You need to get more of the trail system implemented. And then 10 years, guess what? Time to review the plan and consider an update to a plan in 10 years. So that's basically a picture of the process, and a little bit of outline of what's in the plan. The plan is available online. URL is at the bottom of the screen. A lot of people on the committee worked very hard, and the assistance of these funding agencies was, of course, critical, and you see their names up here as well. So it's been a lot of work so far, and it's not over, but it's your opportunity now to have input into the draft plan that the committee has prepared. And I believe that the committee will entertain any questions you have. I think, John, the process is that we have a microphone up here, and maybe if that could be accessible to people, they can either come up, or are you going to do your Oprah thing? Perhaps somebody will speak for the committee. Certainly the way the process was to work was that those who are representatives of the municipalities are to report back through the process to their elected officials. And I believe that occurred in a variety of different ways, in an informal way, and then in a formal way through, for example, we had some of the alternatives that were sort of reaching consensus among the members of the committee. We asked them to take it back to their communities and get input on it. So in that way, the plan has been crafted along the way, not only by the committee members, but also to some extent by the elected officials and planning commission members of the municipalities. So they have been supportive, and certainly when it comes to them, they should be well aware of what it contains and be ready for it.
Piggybacking on that question, is there unanimity among all of the SAPA members in support of this program?
As Joe has explained, this is an ongoing process. At this point, it has been very well received by all SAPA community member elected officials. Interestingly, when the concept was originally proposed, of all 11 municipal governments, I believe it was a unanimous vote except for one vote in one of the outlying townships. So in other words, when the idea for joining the multi-municipal comprehensive plan and the update in the zoning ordinances had been presented to the various municipal officials of the 11 municipalities, every single member voted affirmatively except one. And during the process that has been ongoing the last couple of years, for example, in Newton Township, I regularly attend the supervisor meetings and give them an update on a monthly basis to advise them, and I'm aware of the fact that this occurs in other municipalities as well. There's also quite an extensive email contact list that our Secretary Denise Prowell works tirelessly on. So the information is being sent out through a variety of routes, and I believe that all the elected officials have been fully briefed.
I guess it's my turn. My name's Linda Melvin. I'm with the Sierra Club, and I have two observations about the plan and some questions associated with those observations. One is Lackawanna County and Scranton have both joined with the Cool Cities campaign for the Sierra Club to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's very prominent on their agenda right now, and I didn't see any mention of energy conservation or greenhouse gas emission reduction in the plan. And I realize this is a new development on the timeline, but I think it should be an objective in the plan to assist that municipality of Scranton and the county of Lackawanna to meet their objectives for most of the things that we're planning on in theory will help them in that, but I think in the plan itself it should be stated that these are things that will help with energy conservation, and the implementation aspect could be ordinances about zoning and building codes that would enable these municipalities and the county to reach the greenhouse gas reductions that they've agreed to in the Kyoto protocols. And the other observation I have is I'm the transportation chair, so I paid mostly attention to transportation in the program. And the overall impression that I got from the plan was that transportation in this concept, that as it's outlined in this plan, is to enable better movement with cars. And there was very little emphasis in the objectives about switching that from cars to alternatives, going along with the comment about the price of gasoline as well as the greenhouse gas things. I think an objective ought to be to make transportation planning as important in the plan as stormwater management. There's a whole section on ordinances with stormwater management and very little to say about how transportation can facilitate the plan. And having been at this about 30 years now, transportation is going to drive the success or the failure of your plan. If people can drive wherever they feel like, and we continue to expand our road capacity for them to drive wherever they want, all these plans are going to be for naught because people are just going to continue on the pattern. And I would like to see more emphasis on the plan getting people out of their cars and into other types of transportation alternatives.
Okay. As far as the greenhouse gases, there's been quite a bit of emphasis on the future of walkable communities, the addition of bicycle access routes along various roadways. But this is a very broad look at the entire region. And one of the strengths of the plans, the plan is that each municipality now has available to it, if you look at the plan document as kind of a toolbox of all sorts of different kind of tools, each municipal government will take a look in this immense toolbox and pick and choose which tools they will implement. And the tools they choose to implement will be in the form of their ordinances. And maybe I think I should just, excuse me one second. Currently in the draft plan, I'll look it up in the index. There's a look at the existing conditions of transportation and describes various problems and some of the traffic congestion with the greenhouse gases and fuel consumption. And if you look into the growth, the future plan of what's available to the different municipal officials, they have available to them an entire array of tools that they could put in place that will make the communities more walkable, more emphasis on public transit, and different sorts of ways to cut down on traffic congestion. I think during our focus group meetings of about a year and a half ago, one of the problems that was very well in focus was the fact that the state of Pennsylvania simply cannot afford to maintain the existing road network with the current level of funding. The road network is really deteriorating more quickly than it's being repaired. So I think that's one of the focuses that the plan had acknowledged. But as I said, there's a variety of strategies that will help reduce the emission of harmful gases into the atmosphere, reduce traffic, and make more intelligent uses of alternative forms of transportation. And we also had spoken of bus rapid transit lanes being dedicated for an increase in public transit. And hope of all hopes would be an establishment of a viable light rail system in the area. That's been a very well-received concept among the committee members. There's a large amount of support. At some point in the future, most of us would like to see the implementation of a quality light rail system that would serve passenger as well as freight going forward. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. First of all, on the basic composition of this group, you have one representative for each community, whether there's 330 households or whether there's 49,000 households. And I think the results show that this proportionality is possibly flawed in that the Abingtons get to maintain their pristine, largely single-family residential areas and all the institutional stuff that serves everybody, like the hospitals and the institutions of higher learning. are stuck down in Dunmore and Scranton. There is no, I don't know why you didn't mention any dollar impact. I mean, I could say here, yeah, light rail would be fine. We had light rail at one time. We chose to do away with it, and how much would it cost to restore it? If you don't have money to maintain the roads that you've already built, where's the money going to come from for light rail? And particularly, again, people who are out in the developing areas may have a lot of alternatives that the larger population areas don't, because of the size of their streets. And you know, now traffic gets backed up if a bus stops to let people disembark. Are you going to tear down houses to make the streets wider? I mean, I think there are a lot of things that have not been considered. And the dollars, to me, is the primary missing element. I'm also somewhat offended that a lot of your meetings were held on the same night as Scranton City Council meetings, which precluded people who are active through city council meetings from attending. And no consideration to the percent of the properties in that are in a non-property tax paying status, which of course affects those who are left to pay the bills. Scranton is currently over 25% nonprofits don't pay any property taxes, so the balance has to be paid by in your own projections, dwindling population. But yet all of you people from the outlying areas come down and get well at hospitals and send your children to the institutions of higher learning. And you know, I think it's skewed. I have a lot of comments. I did go to the Albright Library and review it, and I will not take any further time, but I do think the composition should have been weighted more toward population rather than just municipalities. And I'll get the rest of my comments in on the form. Thank you.
We hadn't had any concerns from people from this point past as far as weighted representation. It was discussed briefly in the beginning, and it was agreed upon by all the participants quite some time ago that the representation would be the way it has been. So that's not to discount any concern you may have. It's certainly a point to be made.
I just want to say that a lot of one of the things about that is that on the most important issues we don't vote, so it's not a voting, but it's a consensus.
This is true. Denise Prowl, the secretary, just pointed out that on the most important issues, the issues that need to be voted on are voted on by the municipal governments. The SAPA committee doesn't have the binding power to vote to make the changes. As I said, this is a very broad view of what the future blueprint would look like.
I want
As I said, we've made enormous attempts to keep the public as well informed as possible. We have had a very good partner with the Scranton Times, has been very supportive of covering what we're doing. We've had various newspaper articles from some of the smaller newspapers. The website has been there. We make a great many attempts to make sure the public is as informed as possible. You know, we certainly aren't representing perfection by any means, but if you have any suggestions as to how this might be better achieved, we would certainly take the suggestions. And also, just to address the other comments as well, the group quite some time ago during the focus group meetings to attempt to decide what the future should look like, we all very much recognize the fact that Scranton and Dunmore supports the entire region with a great many invaluable services such as health care and institutions of higher learning. And we also recognize that these are tax-exempt organizations with which which does put more stress on the remaining taxpayers in these urban centers. That is why a number of these strategies have been focused toward attempting to reestablish and reinvigorate the employment opportunities in Scranton and Dunmore particularly. So if you were to read the entire folder, I agree with you, it's a lengthy document, but if you were to read the entire document, you would see where there's a great deal of emphasis put on the future economic health of our urban centers.
That was, the planning firm asked the committee to recommend people for, yeah, to recommend people for those groups who were expert on certain types of things, like transportation was one of them. I forget what they were. Economic development, natural resources, things like that. And so that's what they were made up of. The committee members thought of those people, and those are the people that were put on the list and were called. The other thing I was going to say about the makeup of the group, and we had asked a lot of multi-municipal planning groups, how do you do this? How do you form your group as far as how many members do you have from each municipality? And we asked some very large groups, such as ourselves, how do you do that when there's a city involved and some rural communities? And they said that it didn't, and we talked to the one down in Lancaster County that has an 11 municipal group, and they said that it doesn't matter as much how many representatives there are. They could be all the same number of representatives, because you don't on the most important issues, you don't vote, you reach consensus. So it's taken a lot of just discussion amongst the group members to come up with this.
Sir?
Yes, my name is Lee Morgan. I'm a member of the Scranton-Lackawanna Taxpayers and Citizens Association, as is Marie. And we'd like to invite SAPA to one of our meetings and give you the opportunity, if you'd like to take it, to present as many facts as possible to this group, and to give us an opportunity to review your plan so that we can really study it. I could only speak for myself and say that I don't think any of us are necessarily against the plan. We just aren't as well informed as we'd like to be. And we'd like to extend that invitation to you. Now, Mr. McGough was here today. He's a sitting Scranton City Council member. I think that the public really needs to get a good grasp on what's being presented here, and there's just so much here to present to the public. And I just think that if we allow municipalities and elected officials to be the moving force behind this, the residents may end up with something they don't want. And by the same token, they may get something they do want. And I just think that it'd be important to inform as many people as possible to the plan, to make them aware of what that plan will do for their communities. Because by the same token, if elected officials are against the plan and the residents of these communities think it's a good idea, then by the same token, it can move this plan forward. So I would like to ask you to attend one of our meetings. Our President Ozzie Quinn will contact you if you'd be willing. It won't be there'll be no attacks made on this group at all. We would just like to sit down and have every drop of information you have that we can pass to the community and to ourselves. And we would appreciate that.
Okay. I have no problem. I'll speak with other committee members if they would like to. I will certainly respond to the invitation, Lee, and any other committee member who would like to attend with me.
there's no way we can do that in one meeting with you folks.
Well, maybe it'd be more than one, but I mean.
It would be a year or 2 years or 3 years.
Well, no, what I'm saying to you, sir, is this, is come forward to the group, explain to us what you're doing. You have a binder, you've compiled all this information. All right, present it to us. Present your plan to us.
It's
to the
available,
community.
it's available on the website.
It may
It
be.
has been.
It may be, but the whole truth of the matter is this. How many people actually have access to the website? How many people actually pay attention to the things that are happening around them? And I just think this, how many seniors sit and may watch the tax group and learn something? It's one thing to present a plan and say, well, we've been involved for 2 years. And what I'm saying to you, sir, is we'd like to see your plan. We would like to understand your plan. And that's what we'd like to do. And that's why we, and I'm speaking for myself at this point, would like you to come forward, present your plan to the community, because that's what you're basically saying here, is that we have a plan for the community. And I'm saying, bring your plan to the community. Nobody's against the plan, but don't you think we should have the knowledge that you have gathered and all this time you've spent creating this plan?
Absolutely. Were you aware, Mr. Morgan, the plan was available at the different community libraries as well as all the municipal offices? Was your group aware of that?
I was aware that it was at the library. Yes, I was. But you know what? I'm not just talking about myself. It's not about me. It's about the community. And I think that's what it's really about here. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the whole community. And I think the whole community has a right to be involved in the decision making.
It'll work just fine, because your objective there is and has been our objective as well. We have done everything humanly possible to engage every participant from every community. We have gone out of our way to make sure this information has been available through a variety of sources. The email list alone is extremely lengthy. The libraries have had the copies of the plan. It has been on the website. Every municipal office has had the plan. So to say that the plan has not been widely available is not accurate. It has been available. The problem may have been perhaps not every citizen was aware of where it would have been available at, and we'll certainly work with you in partnership to help solve that problem. Our objectives are the same as yours, Lee. We want everyone to be aware of this plan, and as I said, that was one of the purposes of tonight's meeting, is to engage in conversation and also to raise awareness of what we're doing.
My viewpoint here is that I am not against your plan. I've been in public in Scranton for 15 or 16 years on issues that are beyond your comprehension. And I will tell you this, that most people in this community don't even know what's happening in this community. And there is internet access everywhere. And how many people read the plan for the city of Scranton's recovery plan? Almost no one. But they voted it in. And all I'm saying is, bring the plan forward, present it to the people, and let them see it.
A well-informed public has always been our goal, Lee. Okay. Anyone else?
I just want to say something, because I was the second representative from Dunmore. Jean Walsh, who was the first SAPA chair, worked very, very hard with all of you who were on the committee, and I want to thank you, because this has been a very long process. So you all should be commended. This is also, I think, the third public meeting that has been properly advertised, and it's been no secret. I suspect that the last two public meetings were attended probably like this, and half of the audience are members of the committee or members of city council or borough councils or township supervisors. So I know what I did in Dunmore. I went out to our landowners, especially people who owned more than one tract of land, and I asked them, where do you want to see your property in 20 years? Because we're part of SAPA, and we're probably going to have a map, and this may affect you if you don't tell me. Do you want it conservation? Sierra Club would be happy about that. Do you want it to be residential? Do you want it industrious? What are you looking for? And everybody replied to me. I don't suspect that the Swinnock development in Dunmore is ever going to be industrial. That's our housing. Some of the old neighborhoods in the Second Ward, it's going to stay residential. But Drinker Street, we have property, we have a landfill that's only going to be there till 2020, and it's going to cap out. You know, what do you want in that area? What do you want up on the hill? And people responded. And our map, our section of the map reflects what our landowners wanted. And I'm very proud of our map, and I'm really proud of Gene Walsh, who's sitting next to me, for all of his efforts to help us. I also made a very strong point when I first got on the SAPA committee is, I don't want Newton Township telling me what to do with Drinker Street, and I'm not going to tell you what to do with your farmland. I'm going to want our citizens to tell me what you want in the map. And it was my duty, and I don't know, to go out at council meetings and tell people the SAPA map is available in the lobby of our community center. It was my duty to talk about it in the restaurants. Hey, what do you think about our map? So as an elected official, as our zoning officer and enforcement officer, it was our duty to make sure people knew. And I could tell you, Dunmore Council, there were 7 people who did that. And I suspect all of you who are on the committee and who worked very hard for the last 2 years, you did it too. So you should be commended for your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Any other questions or comments? Any further, Joe?
It's really up to Lee to close the meeting, but I should say that, you know, the drawings are still out there, and we'll sort of be packing up, but we'll be packing up in a way that will allow you to ask any additional questions around the map. And of course, the website is there, and the document is up, and everyone should take the time to look at it and be prepared to respond in a way that you deemed appropriate, either by sending emails to SAPA or writing something which will be read into testimony at a public hearing, or showing up at the public hearing. I don't think we have an exact date, but we are thinking of a date in September. So don't go on that round-the-world trip, because we need you for the public hearing.
And it might be timely for me to just reemphasize a point that Melanie Nero had made, that one of the many strengths of this plan is each individual community will decide for itself what will work and what will not. The autonomy of each community is intact and will continue to be intact. Quite frankly, it'd be a deal breaker if anything else was the case. Each of the 11 municipalities throughout this process have stressed the desire to be the ultimate judge of the quality of the plan, of their participation in it, and each community will retain that power, and rightfully so. That is that's something that will not change. At this point, I just want to make sure.
Just a second. Cindy's going to ask Joe something. There's a step here that I wasn't aware of, and I don't think. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There doesn't have to be a meeting of the SAPA committee before this plan would go out to the public.
Okay. That was a question I had. Procedurally speaking, Cindy, from the state laws, the adoption of this draft plan must take place. The recommendation made to all 11 municipal members.
What happens is, this plan, after this meeting, the comments of this meeting will be considered, and this plan will be given by the municipal representatives to each of their municipalities. When the municipal local officials receive the plan, the 45-day clock starts to tick for the public comment process. After that time closes, then the public hearing takes place. But there's no official meeting to present that to the local governments. It is just, you want to comment on that, Joe?
Just want to comment.
Okay.
Of course, Cindy knows her business, but there's usually a lot of sort of pomp and circumstance involving about the committee that's been working on the plan, finishing their work, as it were, and passing it on to the elected officials. And so there doesn't need to be a vote, there doesn't need to be a meeting, but it would probably be nice if a letter goes out, probably over Lee's signature, because he's the chair, saying, dear elected officials, we've worked long and hard, and this thing's ready for your consideration for adoption, and we would like you to favorably consider it for adoption. Thank you very much. So it's just a kind of nice gesture. In a way, the committee that's been working on it kind of concludes its work by turning it over to the public officials.
What? No, it's not for adoption.
Yeah.
It's for review. Consideration. Right. During the, it won't go to adoption until after the public hearing.
Right, but Denise, what you're turning it over to them for is for them to favorably consider it for adoption. That's what you want from them. You want them to review it. You don't expect them to do it the adoption in a knee-jerk way. They need to allow the 45-day review period, and you'd like them to think about it. But you do want an end result, and the end result isn't nice plan. You want them to take adoption action. So that's why, again, there's usually a kind of genteel formality where the committee turns it over and asks them to favorably consider it for adoption.
And that could take form in the letter, Joe?
Yeah, that could be a letter. And then when the plan is submitted to the municipalities and the contiguous municipalities and school districts, et cetera, then in the same sense, something should be written to them saying that, you know, you are being presented with this plan. There is a 45-day review period, which is in compliant with the municipality's planning code. Please respond, reply to your comments by such and such a date. And then after that, the comments will be considered, and then the public hearing takes place. And if no substantial, changes take place after that, then it can be considered for adoption at that point.
I do want to clarify that point to the SAPA committee members to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing. We've never done this before. It's never been done in this area. We want to make sure that we are in full compliance with all the laws and we proceed properly. So I think what we could do at this point would be to close the meeting. Sir?
If a community decides not to adopt it at this particular time, can they adopt it later?
They have. I think that would depend on a variety of factors. For example, what would the points of contention be? That would be something.
Yeah, and I'll say something just that maybe Joe would want to as well. The plan is looking to be, the goal of the plan is to be adopted by all communities. If one or two communities do not adopt the plan, there's nothing telling them they have to, but those communities cannot then move forward with implementing that plan with the rest of the group and be part of any implementation if they do not adopt the plan. And we've had that happen. We've had communities that have been part of a multi-municipal process who did not adopt right up front, and the other communities did adopt and started moving forward with implementation, and then the other community decided to adopt it, but they're kind of at that point on their own with regard to implementation. And most times they coordinate, but they can't really play catch up with the other municipalities. They just try to coordinate as best as they can, but they really can't be part of an implementation process with the group of communities who did agree to do it within the 45-day period. The advantage to adopting it is that the municipal officials basically seal it and agree that it is an official plan that is to be recognized as such. And when implementation occurs through updating zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinances, et cetera, they are in compliant with the comprehensive plan so that the courts, the municipality's planning code said the courts are to look at any challenge to the validity of a zoning ordinance or curative amendment or any type of challenges. The comprehensive plan comes in line with the zoning. If the zoning ordinance If you have an outdated comprehensive plan, for instance, and you keep updating your zoning ordinance, oftentimes municipalities are challenged because their comp plan is not in compliance with their zoning ordinance. One says one thing and one says the other. So the municipality can be taken to court. The courts need to consider the fact that a plan is adopted in an official plan of a community when they take in zoning considerations as well.
And you will assist me to get the letter properly structured?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
case examples.
Okay, I will ask Cindy to assist me in the composition of the letter to the 11 municipal governments to make sure that we are properly proceeding. Okay, any last comments? Sir? Oh, thank you very much, we appreciate that. Ultimately, the goal is to make northeastern Pennsylvania a better place to live. I know we're all very much aware of the fact that our young, educated people, they get their education, and many of them leave the area. They don't have a lot of confidence in the leadership of the area. They don't have a lot of confidence in a prosperous future for themselves and their family. And there are many of us, myself included, we're hoping that this is the first step in correcting that. We want to be a viable place to live. We want to provide our children and our grandchildren with good economic opportunities. We don't want to be a disappointment to them anymore. That's one of the many goals. Okay. Any further comments, questions? Okay. I'll adjourn this meeting and thank you all very much.